Part 1. The Gate in the Snowstorm. That morning, the small town was covered in a cold, white stillness. Snow had been falling heavily through the night, erasing every outline and making the world seem wrapped in a silent blanket. In front of the elementary school gate, icy gusts swept through, carrying tiny flakes that stung against the skin. The crunching footsteps of parents and children mixed with the howling wind, creating a monotonous symphony of a harsh winter. Every breath rose in a faint mist, fading away in the freezing air. The green iron gate, usually familiar with mornings filled with laughter, now trembled slightly under the force of the wind. The children, bundled up in puffy coats and scarves wrapped snugly around their necks, chattered as they waited for class to start, their cheeks flushed pink from the cold. Mr. Daniel, the school's security guard, stood by the gate in a thick brown coat and a worn wool hat, occasionally wiping the frost from his glasses. It was then, from the white void of the road leading to the school, that an unusual figure appeared. At first, it was nothing more than a moving blur in the snow, but it gradually became clearer. The lynx, with thick, fluffy fur, pointed ears tipped with black tufts, was approaching. Its steps were slow yet steady, each paw leaving a deep mark in the fresh snow. Its breath came out in white clouds in the bitter air, drifting away like small puffs of smoke. The lynx stopped right in front of the school gate, standing still like a living statue. Clamped tightly in its jaws was something small. Only when the snowfall eased did Daniel finally realize it was a child's shoe, made of red fabric, soaked through and stained with dirt. Against the pure white snow, that red stood out like a wound that could not be ignored. The lynx's amber gold eyes shone brightly, never leaving the group of children nearby. There was no panic or aggression in its gaze, only a strange focus, as if it were waiting for a certain reaction from the humans. Snow continued to fall, pattering against the iron fence, mingling with the wind swirling around the corners of the street. Daniel felt his heartbeat quicken, pounding in his chest, while those around him stood frozen, unsure whether to step closer or retreat. In that silent moment, a question echoed in his mind. Why has this lynx come here? And why, on a snowy morning like this, is it carrying a small child's shoe in its mouth? Part 2. The Ripple in the White. Daniel slowly walked toward the gate, his eyes never leaving the lynx. In his memory, such wild animals only appeared near the northern forest, nearly 6 miles away, or about 10 kilometers. Each winter, they usually kept far from human settlements. Yet today, it was here, in the middle of the schoolyard entrance, unfazed by the sound of footsteps, the chatter of children, and the stares fixed upon it. As he drew closer, the shoe in its mouth became clearer. The red fabric was frayed, the toe torn wide open, loose threads fluttering like dry grass in the wind. Along the torn edge, a dark streak of mud clung stubbornly, and mixed within it were irregular red stains. In the dim winter morning light, he could not confirm exactly what they were, but an unease immediately crawled up his spine. Parents, who had been rushing their children into class, began to change their pace. Some pulled their children quickly through the gate, avoiding a second glance. A few phones were raised, camera flashes briefly cutting through the snow. Others stepped back, their eyes flickering with fear. Amid the noise, the youngest children seemed even more curious, leaning forward despite their parents' firm grip on their hands. Daniel kept his voice calm, motioning everyone inside, but his gaze remained locked on the lynx. Its eyes did not hold the wild hunger of a predator ready to strike. Instead, they seemed to be searching for a way to communicate. That gaze was long, deep, and unwavering, as if it was trying to convey something words could not. He felt himself caught by it, like an invisible cord pulling him closer. The lynx still did not flee. Instead, it lifted one front paw, then set it down again, with a slowness that seemed almost deliberate. Such a simple motion, yet it made Daniel think it was waiting for him to come closer, or for him to understand something. From deep in its throat came a faint growl, not threatening, but more like a hazy reminder. Snow continued to settle on its thick fur, creating a thin, white dusting. The red shoe still dangled from its mouth, droplets of melted snow dripping to the ground, blending into the whitewashed schoolyard. In that scene, the lynx's presence was like the only ripple on a winter canvas, a ripple Daniel knew he would regret ignoring. Part 3: Footprints leading into the forest. The lynx turned its head slightly, the black tufts on the tips of its ears trembling in the wind. It did not dart away or vanish as wild animals usually do when humans come close. Instead, it walked slowly, step by step, toward the edge of the forest behind the school. Its back dipped slightly, its long tail brushing the snow, leaving a faint, continuous trail on the white ground. Every so often, it stopped and looked back at Daniel, as if checking whether he was keeping up. Daniel hesitated for a moment, the question echoing in his mind, "Why am I following it?" But almost instantly, he remembered the red shoe and the mottled red stains on it. The chill he felt was not only from the snow-laden wind, but from a foreboding he could not quite name. He tightened his scarf around his neck and glanced quickly toward the schoolyard. Most of the parents had already ushered the children inside, though a few eyes still followed him, a mixture of curiosity and concern. He began to walk. The snow reached up to his ankles, each step producing a muffled crunch that was quickly swallowed by the wind. Almost immediately, Daniel noticed something. On the pristine white surface, alongside the lynx's paw prints, there was another trail, much smaller, but child's footprints. They intermingled with the animals, sometimes close together, sometimes slightly apart, as if a small person had been walking with the lynx, or had been led by it. Fresh snowfall had begun to blur the prints, but they were still visible enough to show the direction of travel. Some of the child's footprints sank deep, showing the shape of the shoe's toe. Others were bare, tiny toes pressed into the freezing snow. Daniel's chest tightened. The wind howled louder as he neared the forest's edge. Bare branches cracked under the weight of snow, and every so often, a heavy clump fell, landing with a sudden thud. The air within the forest felt thicker, colder, and quieter. Every step he took, every breath he drew, sounded unnervingly clear, mingling with the faint rustle of snow falling from the treetops. A few dozen yards in, Daniel found the first object, a tiny pink wool glove, dusted with snow, lay draped over a low stump. He bent to pick it up, feeling the damp cold seep through his own gloves. There was no reason for a child to leave a glove in the middle of the forest, unless it had been dropped in fear or exhaustion. The lynx kept moving at the same steady pace, never too far ahead, yet never letting him come closer than a few yards. Occasionally it would stop, look straight at him, then continue. The way it moved made Daniel feel as though he was being guided. And that feeling was no longer vague, it was a clear certainty. The deeper he went, the more signs appeared. Beside the footprints and the glove, he came across a torn family photograph, the paper edges curled from moisture. The image faded, but still showing the little girl standing between two smiling adults. A few steps later, a strip of red ribbon was caught in a dry bush, swaying lightly in the wind like a fragment of a long-forgotten party. And then, near the base of an old pine tree, he found a daisy-shaped button, its white enamel bright against the frozen gray earth. Daniel stooped to gather each item. He could not explain why. Perhaps it was instinct to preserve evidence. Or perhaps it was simply because these were pieces of a story whose ending he did not yet know. Each object made him walk faster, ignoring the cold wind biting at his cheeks and the snow that was growing deeper by the minute. Then he heard it. At first, it was only a strange whistle in the wind, but when he stopped and held his breath, the sound became clearer, a broken, trembling, faint melody, a cry, or at least, something that sounded very much like a cry. It faded quickly, carried away by the wind, leaving behind a heavy silence. Daniel looked up. The lynx had stopped, standing between two dark tree trunks, its gaze fixed on him. Its breath rose in thick white clouds, and for the first time, he felt it with absolute clarity. He was not hunting the lynx. The lynx was leading him somewhere. Part 4: The Snow-Covered Den. The wind seemed to grow stronger as Daniel ventured deeper into the forest. Cold currents slipping through the gaps in his coat and numbing his skin. The lynx was still ahead, the distance between them unchanged, like a thin yet unbreakable thread binding man and beast together. Suddenly, it veered sharply to the right, slipping through a narrow gap between two thorny bushes. Daniel had to lean sideways, pushing aside branches as rigid as needles to pass through. The path led down into a hollow where the ground dipped a few yards, about 2 to 3 meters, lower than the surrounding area. Under the dim winter sky, the depression looked like a silent, white basin, eerie in its stillness. The lynx stopped at the rim of the hollow. It turned to glance at him one last time before stepping down gently. Daniel's eyes followed it, and he spotted something that might have been easy to miss before. A mound of snow that rose unnaturally from the ground, almost entirely hidden beneath a tangle of dry branches. Snow lay thick upon it, but the shape suggested that what lay beneath was more than just dirt and rock. He descended into the hollow, the snow reaching almost to his knees. As he drew closer, a faint current of air slipped through the branches, carrying with it a trace of warmth. Fragile and out of place in this sea of cold, the lynx had crouched beside the mound, its eyes urging him forward. Daniel knelt and began to push away the branches. The soft snow fell away, revealing a dark space beneath, not quite a cave, but more like a small hollow dug out or formed naturally, just deep enough to shield a small human body. Leaning closer, his heart thudded when he saw a pale face hidden in the shadows. The little girl, no more than 6 years old, curled into herself. Her hair was matted and tangled with crystals of snow. Her lips were purple, and her bare feet stuck out, one still wearing the remaining red shoe. The other bare. "Oh my God," Daniel breathed, his words swallowed by the wind. The girl blinked weakly at the sudden light, her breath shallow and broken. On her cheeks, tears had dried into faint white streaks of salt. Her entire body trembled, every tiny movement seeming to take all the strength she had left. He needed no one to tell him who she was, the child missing since the day before. The focus of the frantic search by police and townspeople. He had seen her face on the flyer at the bus stop, the daughter of Marissa, the second-grade teacher at the school. Every morning, Marissa greeted him with a weary but warm smile. And now, her little girl lay in his arms like a candle about to burn out. A blast of wind against his neck snapped him back to action. Daniel tore off his gloves, pressing his bare hands to the girl's cold cheeks before wrapping her in his thick scarf. Then he lifted her into his arms, shocked by how light she felt, not because she was small, but because the life inside her was slipping away. The soaked red shoe the lynx had carried to the school that morning was hers, the final piece in the trail that had brought him here. There was no doubt in his mind now, the lynx had found her first. And somehow, it had decided to bring that sign to the school gate to seek help. Daniel looked up at the lynx. It was still there, its gaze fixed on the two humans who had just found each other. In that moment, amid the skin-cutting cold and the thick falling snow, an unspoken understanding passed between them. Daniel gave a small nod, a silent thank you. There was no time to lose. He held the girl tightly and turned to make his way back. But the old tracks were now almost completely buried under snow, just faint impressions in the whiteness. The moment he felt the creeping fear of losing his bearings, the lynx began to move. It turned, walking ahead once again, keeping just the right distance for him to follow, pausing now and then to wait. On the way back, the wind grew fiercer, whipping up walls of snow that blurred the path. Daniel bent low to shield the girl, feeling each fragile breath against his wrist. Every step was a battle against the clock and against the cold gnawing at them both. The lynx did not abandon them. At times, it circled behind, walking alongside him, as if afraid that a single misstep could send them off course. And indeed, in this endless white, losing one's way could happen in seconds, step after step, until at last, Daniel caught sight of the familiar muted light at the forest's edge, the grayish-blue outline of the school's iron fence. His heart pounded, part joy, part exhaustion. Still, he held the girl tightly. determined not to let her endure another moment of the cold. The lynx slowed its pace as they neared the tree line. Just before they stepped out from the cover of the forest, it stopped completely. Its golden eyes burned bright against the white, following his every step until only a few yards remained between them. Daniel paused, wanting to say something, but his throat tightened. Still, he knew, without it, this morning would have ended in a far darker way. Part 5. The moment at the school gate. Snow was still falling heavily as Daniel stepped out from the edge of the forest, holding the little girl tightly in his arms. His breathing was labored, every step dragging his aching body through the white expanse. Yet the moment the outline of the green iron fence came clearly into view, it was as if a small flame ignited inside him, pushing back the cold that gnawed at his bones. Ahead, the schoolyard was quieter than before. Fresh snow had nearly covered the old footprints. Then, from the main entrance, a figure burst out, Marissa herself. Her face was pale with worry, hair loose and windblown, eyes red and swollen from crying. The instant she saw the small figure in Daniel's arms, her knees nearly gave way, her voice catching in her throat as she called out for her child. "Oh my God, Emily!" Her voice cracked, immediately joined by the hurried footsteps of others. People rushed toward them, surrounding the pair, their hands trembling with a mix of relief and fear. A teacher dialed for an ambulance, while a parent quickly removed their coat to wrap around the girl. Still, Daniel did not let go until he was certain she was warm. In the middle of that chaos, Daniel turned his head toward the forest. At the edge of the snow stood the lynx, silent as it had been from the very beginning. Its golden eyes were fixed on him, utterly still. Snow lay on its back in a thin layer, but it did not shake it off, as if its entire focus was locked on this moment. He wanted to say something, a thank you, or even just a greeting, but the distance and the wind would make any words meaningless. So instead, he simply nodded, letting his gaze speak for him. As if receiving an answer, the lynx turned away. Without a sound, it stepped into the thick snow, its form fading as though melting into winter itself. In only a few breaths, it was gone, leaving behind a quiet emptiness at the forest's edge, the place that had just witnessed a silent rescue. The wail of an ambulance siren carried from afar, long and clear through the cold air. The girl was quickly placed on a stretcher, bundled in layers of thick blankets. Marissa gripped her daughter's hand tightly, walking beside her and whispering words no one else could hear. Daniel stood alone by the gate, his breathing still heavy. He did not feel tired anymore, only drawn toward the forest, the place where, only minutes ago, a wild creature had done something humans might never believe. And the question still hung in his mind: how did it know where the girl was? And why bring the shoe to the school? Part 6. The echo in the snow. The next day, the snowstorm began to fade. The small town emerged beneath a pure white calm, more peaceful now. Yet the story of yesterday morning had already spread everywhere. People spoke of a school security guard who had found a missing girl in the forest. Just before the cold could claim her last warmth, they spoke of the red shoe, of the small footprints mingled with those of an animal, and of a mysterious lynx that had appeared in the schoolyard. But when Daniel told the full story, not everyone believed him. Some smiled faintly, thinking he had imagined the lynx to make the tale more dramatic. Others said perhaps the animal had only appeared by chance, and a series of coincidences had led him to the girl. Daniel did not argue. He simply sat at the small wooden table in his break room, sipping hot tea slowly, letting the memories return detail by detail. He remembered the skin-cutting cold as he went deeper into the forest, remembered the amber gold eyes tracking his every step, remembered the moment he found the girl curled up in the snow hollow, and remembered the patience of the lynx as it led the way back. Emily was still in the hospital, but the doctors said she would make a full recovery. Marissa had come to see Daniel the night before, throwing her arms around him and crying. In her emotion, she did not say thank you. She only gripped his hand tightly, as if any words would be unnecessary. Outside, the forest remained silent under its heavy blanket of snow. Daniel knew he would not see that lynx again, or if he did, it would be in another moment, under different circumstances, but the memory of it would remain, clear as footprints in snow not yet melted. He exhaled slowly, letting the warm breath merge with the thin mist by the window frame. To him, the story did not need to be believed by everyone to have meaning. What mattered was that, on a harsh winter morning, a wild creature had stepped beyond the boundaries of its own survival instincts to save a fragile human life. Sometimes, salvation comes from beings we would never expect, if only we are willing to listen. Outside, the wind swept through the forest again, shaking loose a few dry branches. Daniel gazed for a long time into that vast white. In his memory, the lynx's golden eyes still burned bright, like a small lantern guiding the way through a long winter.